It's Sunday, July 26, 2026. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to The Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism on Substack at The Anthony Davis. Our guest today is a Wisconsin state representative and leading candidate for governor. Francesca Hong, welcome to The Weekend Show.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making the time. I know you're very busy, and I know that the governor's race has become one of the most closely watched Democratic primaries in the country. You're currently one of the front runners for the nomination ahead of the August 11 primary. The polling puts you in first place, although polling also suggests that a large share of Democrats voters are undecided. Just from your perspective, how's the race from where you're sitting?
The race is dramatic, but we are staying focused on talking to voters. And while that seems pretty obvious that all campaigns should be doing, we have always been an organizing first campaign. And what that means is that our volunteer operations have now grown exponentially. And it has been so exciting to hear what the actual conversations are like at the doors, that we continue to focus on meeting voters where they are. And I would say that based on polling numbers and what we're hearing from folks, that our message, our agenda for permanent affordability, people are tired of this shit, and I think that they are ready for bold solutions.
Democrats are often referred to as sitting in a quite a large tent. And I've often struggled to kind of get my head around that. But I suppose in its simplest language, it's that there is such a broad range of views, especially when you compare it to Republicans, who seem to have just like four things that they're really interested in and tend to hammer those messages very clearly. You know, they don't like immigrants. They don't particularly like women. And they don't like people of color. And they don't really want to pay any tax. I mean, that's kind of like that's that bunch. But Democrats really are very nuanced. And so where is the nuance for you? What makes you different and identifiable and the kind of Democrat that you are? Just tell people kind of where you stand.
I stand with everyday people here in Wisconsin, the many. The working class folks are the majority. We should be the party. I'm proud to be the single mom, the only wage worker. I'm a renter currently. I've worked in the legislature for the last 6 years, and I'm proud to represent the people of the 76th district. But I also come from hospitality, worked as a chef, and I own a restaurant for 7 years, and I'm still bartending. And what that means is that I put service and sacrifice first and care. I think the people of Wisconsin deserve someone who cares about the people first. And the nuance is that we're going to make sure that everyone in Wisconsin can live in a place that they can afford.
Affordability has become an important word, although Donald Trump has started to kind of use it to describe, he kind of thinks of it just as a word with no meaning, doesn't he? And the reality is, you know, for him, he's never really had to think about affordability and doesn't even understand how people buy groceries. Thinks you have to show ID for groceries. So he's a really bad example of what it's like on the ground. You know, we've seen this with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who also worked in the service industry and was ribbed royally by Republicans for that. But as I see it, what it does is it really kind of grounds you in what is necessary. Do you think more lawmakers would benefit from actually coming from reality and staying in reality and being part of communities, whether it be in hospitality or other jobs, rather than some of the routes that people take to get to these lawmaker positions?
It has been our superpower. And it continues to grow as more people find themselves not only relatable to my lived experiences, but they see themselves in their leadership and their vision. I think that there is so much gatekeeping in politics. I understand that relationships and information is the currency that you need, but the deals we should be making should be with the everyday working class folks who deserve a government that is a force of good and actually delivers for them so that they have what they need to go live the lives that they want. I think that when you have accessibility to your representation, when you see not just yourselves in them, but that you know that they get the hustle, that they get you, that maybe we can start building more of that trust back into politics so that the work we do is actually reflective of the solutions the people need. I always remind myself that it's the folks who are closest to the struggle who should be closest to the power because they best know the solution. So I think the relatability aspect in being able to inform policy and understand that the lived experiences truly do matter. And maybe if there were more moms and chefs and bartenders, folks who got it, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place.
It's so true. And more women as well, because it seems to be the boys that have got the country into so much of a mess. And, it clearly hasn't worked with those guys in charge. Do you feel that the tide is turning? Because I don't know about you, I was feeling quite hopeless until relatively recently. Things were not really going well. And the federal government policies and the White House policies seemed so fascistic and so increasingly insane. I mean, bonkers in many cases. And I don't know if you saw any clips of the White House Correspondents' Dinner that was replayed because of the assassination attempt, but Donald Trump was literally shaking the hands of journalists who had exposed him in the Epstein files. I mean, it was just so weird, and I felt like I was living in some dystopia watching this. But there is a renewed sense of hope, partly with what's been coming out of New York with Zoran Mamdani, and generally this idea that the kind of left wing of the Democratic Party, and it's ridiculous that I have to say that because the Democratic Party really should be proudly left wing, is seeing a resurgence and is being taken more seriously and is less of a fringe, whereas Republicans like the far right has become the mainstream. A similar thing is happening to Democrats, both on a national level and certainly locally. Do you feel that sense of hope that I do?
I do. And I think it's so important to hold on to hope as part of building resistance in new systems that actually build an economy that works for working class people, where we aren't paying with our tax dollars tax breaks for the ultra wealthy and billionaires, where our tax dollars are being invested back into our community as opposed to going to the massive profits of companies that aren't even here in our state. I think that the hope we see in communities and the hope, especially right now in young people who are getting engaged and being creative in canvassing, in text banking, in hosting events, and in supporting our campaign. These are some of the folks who really, politicians and haven't given them any hope, no reason to hope. And it's incredible to feel the energy of people getting involved in government and campaigns for the first time. That apathy and disillusionment is very real. It's still present. But to be able to fight that with hope in politics and a government that can actually be a force of good, we hold on to that. We take deep responsibility with that. And I think that's what encourages me to fight even harder alongside folks to make sure that we get this right, that we win this for the people, and that we actually deliver. There's a lot of noise around ideology or labels, and I understand that especially in different, especially in a very online world. But that's why I think canvassing and having these in-person conversations with your neighbors, some neighbors that you never expect might have been talking to you about politics all of a sudden. These are the conversations and the roots we have to go back to. And speaking of roots, Wisconsin has deep progressive roots. And it's important that I think we go back to becoming the laboratory of democracy that we've been, instead of the fucking petri dish for, I'm sorry, can I swear? I should have checked with you well before
You're very welcome. You're very welcome to swear, because it's that important. And this is, I actually encourage people, especially Congress people and some people. I mean, I noticed Adam Schiff's been making very sweary videos recently, and it makes me laugh an awful lot. But it's got to the point where it's so important and it's so serious that sometimes there are not the words. And actually, it's like the obscenity is essential to make the point of how serious this is. And so for me to see and hear Congress people using language that you wouldn't normally hear is actually just an example, because you do want to scream. I mean, I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's like, and just to go back to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, there was 1,000 journalists sitting there listening to a speech that was absolutely insane and full of lies and abuse about the free press.
Yeah.
And they just sat there and took it. And I thought to myself, why is everybody not walking out? Why is there not a kind of collective sense of anger? Where is the outrage against this dollar store dictator? And so of course, in all of us, those who care at a visceral level, swearing is the least we can do.
We curse because we care.
There's a campaign slogan, yeah.
Democrats have to embrace our shared humanity. I think folks want to see their politicians just being human. If we can't affirm people's frustrations, rightful, justified anger, and growing fear,
yes,
how are they supposed to trust to see that we are acting in their best interest when our reaction to the absurdity and the absolute corruption and oppression of this federal regime right now? And here in Wisconsin, when I say we are a petri dish for conservatism, is that there are conservative think tanks that will copy paste bills, what I call like the bill factories, and they'll shovel them around to different states. And Republicans are introducing, whatever they're being told to introduce at the state level to try to see how much of our rights and freedoms they can take away at. And I think that here in Wisconsin, we're seeing how much of a divide that has created it's manufactured a divide between our rural and urban and suburban communities, when in fact, Wisconsinites, our values of working hard in taking care of our neighbors, in, supporting good Wisconsin companies for good jobs, having a great public school education system, all of that has been eroded by Republican policies in the last 16 years in the legislature, defunding public education, raising property taxes on everyday folks while cutting taxes for the wealthiest, and giving tax exemptions to data centers. And I think folks now, we're seeing more where to put the blame, and having a common villain and understanding that is so incredibly important. But there is a desire for actual solutions and alternatives. And I think that's where it's frustrating for me as a democratic socialist. When I am on the side of the many, the working class, we are the majority in our state and in this country. And yet it is sensible to want folks to have living wages. It is radical that we have 11 billionaires in our state that are trying to bankroll the Republican pedophile protector, while we've got folks here in our schools at risk of their school closing their next year, or once again having to go to referenda. So I think the emotional, the swearing, being a human and having a reaction that is very relatable puts you in touch with the actual reality that what is happening is not right. And I'm glad that Adam Schiff, I've heard our governor, Tony Evers,
yes,
drop one or few bullshits now. And I'm pretty sure next door in Michigan, with Governor Whitmer as well. And so I just ask that folks remember that I really I started this trend. All right, let's remember who took the hits.
Right, the OG obscenity, right?
Yeah. Who took the hits for swearing, and now we're celebrating it. Just right. We can tell I'm a little petty about that.
Well, anyway. Maybe we should have a swear box to raise money for the campaign. You do very well, right? Let's talk about, and let's dispel some of the myths about democratic socialism. Because, of course, Donald Trump and his henchmen would describe it as communism and as Marxism and as all of the isms that they probably couldn't define even if they were asked to. I grew up in a social democracy. It's a little different, but arguably many of these isms are just a matter of perspective. And so to me, socialized medicine is normal, and a welfare state is normal. There's nothing radical about these things. And to live in a country that doesn't have these things seems a little bit weird. Anyway, back to America. Just talk about what democratic socialism means to you. And why do you think it is that so many democratic socialist candidates are starting to get the attention of people and being taken much more seriously than some of the traditional kind of centrist candidates who refuse to nail their colors to the mast?
Fairness, human rights, and democracy. The word social, the word Democrat. I think sometimes folks in the Democratic Party who see themselves as more centrists or conservatives forget that, those two words are in the label. That fairness means ensuring that working class people have their fair share and that the ultra rich and the mega corporations are paying theirs. Democracy in that everyone has a fair shot at economic security, that we have more democratic control of our, that there's more democratic control of the work that we are doing, and human rights. This is why it was important for us to speak, for me to speak and introduce a ceasefire resolution for calling what's happening in Gaza a genocide, that no one should, live under oppression, and that all people deserve self-determination. Democratic socialism to me means that I put people first. And I think that the reason the extreme right will continue to throw all the isms around is that they don't want us to talk about the solutions and the economic policies that will actually help people with rising costs and the affordability crisis.
Your policies, as I understand them, include free school meals statewide, greater protections for workers and unions, expanded affordable housing, higher taxes, as you say, on wealthy individuals and corporations, a public bank, a state-owned public bank, which I think is rather brilliant. What people fail to understand is that none of these things are radical. They're totally achievable. Mm-hmm. And we've seen some of this in New York with childcare and other things. The reason they haven't happened before is normally due to just corruption and leaders who just won't entertain these things. It's not that there isn't the money for them. It's just that they don't want the people to have their taxes back through public services.
Being a democratic socialist means that I'm unapologetically pro-public, and that no one should be too poor to live in our state. And that when we invest in public goods, and we say childcare as a public good, public education, that, these aren't things that are under more government control, but in fact give you more control of the ways and the opportunities that you can have to seek a better life for yourself. In fact, I think it is, the investment in the public is a way to invest in more freedom for the public, where you're not bound by economic hardship because more of your money is going to pay for the tax breaks of the wealthiest or for the tax breaks for the corporations. And you're seeing it invested in things that we all use, including the billionaires, roads, libraries, parks. Well, I don't know how many billionaires all go to the libraries, but I like to think that they do.
Yeah.
So it is how we prioritize the money. The money is there.
You mentioned data centers earlier. Let's talk about that for a second, because to me, a data center, especially in a local community, is a real physical sign of the wealthy taking over and not giving back to the community, right? It's like a monolithic thing. It takes up water, it takes up resources and energy and electricity, and invariably it just sucks energy out of a community and doesn't really give back. And in terms of employment, I presume a data center will need a security guard once it's up and running, and that's about it. So you have part of your campaign is to pause the data center planning or to stop it completely?
Our legislation I introduced is a moratorium. And so it is a 1-year moratorium that I support that would stop the construction of any new AI data centers until we have the enforceable mechanisms and state laws that actually ensure that we're protecting taxpayers, our natural resources, and public health. I think that the issue of data centers is one of democracy that is giving, as you said, control over to a private entity that is going to control how much things cost in your neighborhood, what can happen to your water and your natural resources, and really compromising the future of our state, humanity as a whole. Just because I'm team human does not mean that I'm anti-AI, but I believe that we should be controlling AI and that it should not be controlling us. We're not going to sell Wisconsin out to the highest bidder, and we're not going to sell out our communities. And I think that this is an important moment to show that the people can take control of what happens in their lives and in their communities when it comes to large corporate profit and corruption from big tech. And especially the visceral response we're seeing from folks when it comes to flock cameras, when it's come to ICE insurgencies, that communities are recognizing they want to be able to protect one another and see community safety and a state that actually puts the people first. And ultimately, why are we making deals with business that's operating on massive amounts of borrowed money with massive risk? And what the state is risking is the people's health, the people's wealth. And I think seeing the bipartisan multi-ideology folks all across different zip codes come together in firm opposition of data centers shows that the people understand what the growth of these centers actually means for them and their communities. And it's about time that more politicians, instead of underestimating our voters, actually listen to them.
What do you hear? Your door-knocking campaign is significant, and I know you're very proud of that. What are you hearing from people? Because there's a range of opinions, there's a range of positions and voices. But what are the themes that you're hearing from people, not necessarily traditional Democratic voters, but because I find that when you speak to people one-on-one, we all tend to want the same thing. It's only when you get people in a group, right? Or, that kind of tribalism that goes with that. And people just following the flock. But what are you hearing one-on-one from people? What do they want? What do they need?
What we're hearing is that people want change, that people want to feel safer, and they want to know that change can happen. And this isn't about one individual candidate and just the campaign. I think what it is we as a movement now have really helped people realize that it's being a part of change that matters even more, that they play a role in it, which means that folks want agency. And just yesterday, there's a massive data center going up in Port Washington, Wisconsin. And I met a gentleman who was from a very small town next to the town of Port Washington. And, his parents are Republicans, he's not. And they're coming together on this issue and wanting to fight with their community against a growing threat. And so people want safe communities. People want, to be able to go on vacation. People want to be able to not think about which bill they may have to put on hold. Our young people want to know that they're going to be able to find a job in our state. Our elders want to be able to age with dignity. I'm having conversations with folks about private equity. I did not expect that to become more of a known entity. But again, why are we underestimating our voters, especially in this age of how accurate the information is? Folks wondering what we're going to do about, county nursing homes or publicly owned nursing homes being bought up by private equity, or single family homes in neighborhoods being bought up by private equity, jacking up home prices for folks. This is a conversation I had with a young student at UW Green Bay, talking about, her hometown in Rhinelander. And so what folks are recognizing is that this is about taking on the bullies, the corruption, the corporate interest that continues to screw them over. And folks are tired of being screwed over.
They often use the phrase, are you better off today than you were 4 or 5 years ago? We hear that. Yeah. But the world is changing so fast. And obviously, initially the war in Ukraine, or COVID first, and the war in Ukraine, and now the war in Iran. And of course, you mentioned Gaza too. These kind of geopolitical events have a knock-on effect. We've seen it certainly with Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the national energy crisis and the cost of diesel and the cost of gas going up and up. And there doesn't seem to be any sign of abating there. And Donald Trump's solution to this is just to bomb the hell out of them and think that they will at some point submit. No concept of the culture of the Iranians who are so kind of dug in for their history and their rights and everything else. So with that not ending anytime soon, how do you talk to people about these kind of national issues that we do struggle to do anything about because of this unitary government where one man seems to be making decisions without consulting Congress and committing war crimes by entering into illegal wars?
We talk about how it's connected to what's in their backyard, right? And what's happening in their everyday life. And I think right now it's important to tie the Republican nominee to everything that is happening at the federal level, because he has endorsed it with a smile on his face, with no regard for the people of Wisconsin, and will continue to make excuses. And it's insulting because the folks in Wisconsin work hard. And Tom Tiffany has not only missed votes and continues to sell out the people, but he's selling out our natural resources. He's on the side of mining. He's on the side of making sure that millions are losing their health care, that we're ripping food away from our kids, that he supports a national abortion ban, and that he's against legalizing marijuana. And I think with, talking about the global issues for folks, this is where we bring in moral courage and shared values. Yes. That you have the conviction to stand up for someone around the world, knowing that to me signals that you're going to stand up to make sure that you're fighting injustice everywhere, here at home, and when you're thinking about someone abroad. And here I remind people that, it's talking to and caring about right now in this moment, a way to fight back against what's happening with, and maybe this is a little overly romantic or a little corny, but there is so much that can be done when we think about caring for someone we know and someone that we may never meet.
Yes.
And we can, and that's still the Wisconsin way here. We are deeply resilient in how different our state's demographics are in terms of, we've got rural, urban, suburban area. We have a strong agricultural history in our state. This is a strong progressive history in our state. And for Wisconsin to be at the center of where I think we can truly have more transformative change in how we think about government, it's incredibly exciting. And I veered very far from our question that you asked, but here I am, well media trained to you now.
What you're describing is collective responsibility. And it's something that doesn't really get talked about enough, the value of it. Mm-hmm. The value of collective responsibility pays dividends to the individual. You just have to get involved. You just have to join in. If we were to let's talk about climate change and kind of green energy for a moment, because, it's so frustrating that climate change has been demonized and weaponized by the federal government and certainly, congressional candidates and the governor's candidate, candidate for governor in your state too. This idea that Republicans don't think that climate change is real, or they refer to it as Democrat stuff. And yet Mother Nature does not distinguish between states and borders. It touches us all. And we're seeing it now with crazy extreme weather events and wildfires and everything else. This is scientifically, this is a direct effect of the human contribution to the changing climate. When you talk to people, how many of them recognize that there is this propaganda that has been created by the right? It's a bit like that Netflix film, Don't Look Up, isn't it? It's like it's happening. It's actually happening. And they'll deny it's happening whilst there's a kind of raging storm going on behind them. It's almost as insane as that. So do you find that people generally recognize that the climate change and the collective responsibility that we all have to get involved and to try and, hang our washing out to dry rather than putting it in the dryer, and driving an electric vehicle if we can? I mean, these types of things, how much they make a difference?
We had record high air quality hazards levels this year, this week. Hazardous levels. And when you can see the air quality, the seeing is believing happened this week across Wisconsin. Yes. The smog, the folks, it literally impacting your sleep, the way that you breathe. And so the denial, I think there's definitely less, and the climate issues around data centers is top of mind for many people. Yeah. But take, the North Woods of our state, North and Central Wisconsin. It is climate that is the bipartisan issue. It is ensuring that we're protecting public lands, that people know about, making sure that we're taking on PFAS in water, that it is very much presenting the solution, which is twofold in holding polluters accountable and actually making them pay. We have incredibly loose environmental regulations here in our state and deeply defunded state agencies, which makes it harder to actually enforce the state laws. And we need to establish state standards when it comes to things like PFAS and making sure that we are building a green bank to invest in the public infrastructure to create good green jobs with good benefits that are union jobs. And so it's this I think the recognition that the problem is there is much has decreased because people are literally seeing the air quality.
Yes.
But this is where Democrats have to be hyper disciplined in making sure that we're talking about the solutions and the investment that has to come, because the Republicans have been defunding our state agencies to help us protect our natural resources. And now we have responsibility to build the jobs and to build the green thing, the green new energy efficient buildings, because we have to talk about creating jobs too. And I think that when we connect climate to these very everyday economic realities, it makes it so that we can bring, again, more working class people together. It's not going to be easy, but there's going to be some solution that someone connects to. And it's important that we name it and not get so bogged down in shaming.
Yes. Because climate change can actually bring so many jobs to communities like yours. And this, again, it's like something that people fail to see is how much value there is. I mean, I would advocate for like the Defense Production Act, where everybody has to get involved, making solar, building wind farms, creating initiatives that get the entire country. Because it's even Elon Musk once admitted that you could run the whole of America with a solar farm that was 100 square miles.
We can't say solar farm here in Wisconsin, though.
Well, of course.
I will say, well, one thing I'll add is that we don't want to create that resentment of the investment in green energy in rural has to benefit rural. And we don't want to attack people's way of life or more of that heritage. Yes. And I think that seeing economic development in the cities that we need Democrats to talk much, much more about how I go in and I have no qualms actually blaming. I'm born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, the capital city. So we're the second largest city here in Wisconsin. Yeah. And it's okay for some of our folks from larger towns to shit on our towns and to go to smaller communities and recognize that the pride there is valid and building up more resentment. We want that economic opportunity to come, for those communities by their communities. And that's why as a state too, I talk, for our policies, I talk a lot about local control, that we are a state where actually sharing the revenue equitably, which we haven't done for over 16 years with Republicans because they don't want our cities and towns to have the resources that they need to invest in public goods, that once we start doing that, they can start seeing, I hope that they would start feeling the actual opportunity to build more resilient economies and better ways of life in their communities without being told how to do it by the state. Your money right now by Republicans have been going to pay for the tax breaks for the wealthiest. Your small businesses, a lot of them are struggling because they're now eligible for the same tax credit that these larger manufacturing corporations are getting. And it's screwing us over. As governor, I want to be a governor that actually invests in the proper shared revenue, trying to make shared revenue sexy here again. But for your town, you know what you need for your town.
Right. Finally, let's talk about how all this is going to get paid for, because I think, again, this is a gap, isn't it, in the understanding, in the thinking. And a lot of this comes down to tax receipts, that the wealthiest simply because they have good accountants and because tax law and loopholes for tax avoidance rather than tax evasion is designed to have them pay as little tax as possible. And to them, that's them being successful. Their business is successful. They pay as little as possible. And yet they still use the roads and the sidewalks and the public services.
And they got to call the fire services when there's a fire.
When there's a fire, exactly. And so they can afford to pay more in tax. I mean, there's only so much money people need. So how do we make people realize that all of this stuff can be paid for and can be covered if the very wealthiest in society, and we are talking about the top 1%, I mean, there is enough money there to kind of cover these budgets if they actually paid their fair share? Because there's that Warren Buffett rule, isn't there, about his secretary pays proportionately more tax than he does as one of the wealthiest people in the country. And that needs to change.
It's starting to make so much more sense for people that the money is there.
Right.
The money is there. And, when it's hard to talk about tax percentages, right? When I'm talking to folks about how our lowest income earners are paying the higher tax rates than our highest income earners. Our smallest businesses are paying higher tax rate than our larger businesses. Yeah. It's the feeling of and knowing that no matter, you can be working 2 or 3 jobs and you're still paying more in taxes than one of the 11 billionaires in our state.
Yeah.
It's absurdity. And I think that when we're talking about taxing the wealthiest, and you say it as tax the rich, tax the ultra rich. This is about, we don't want to, I don't want it to be about taking away something that is somebody wants to attain or they're aspiring to be. And I do recognize that, especially when I'm talking to, a lot of guys, a lot of older guys or younger guys, where it feels a bit more like a threat on what they want to do or a threat on success they've already had. Right.
But 2 things can be true.
Absolutely. And we're talking about the fact we haven't done this and look where we are. That is always where I remind folks that incrementalism is irresponsible. We can't keep doing things the way that they are and asking the folks with more to pay more so that there's actually more for the rest of us isn't as scary as we think, especially not when we know that everyone is using these public goods. And when I ask a lot of folks, should there be billionaires and multimillionaires right now who are working less than you are, watching their wealth grow? This is about going back to who I am as a democratic socialist. Fairness, democracy, and human rights. People have a right to economic security and to live a good life and to live a life of dignity. And more folks are recognizing that. And we need our public servants to reiterate that they deserve better.
I'm grateful for your thoughtfulness and the quietness of your thought too. It's very powerful. And it's in marked contrast to the way Republicans avoid questions and really are unable to answer anything in detail about their own communities. And clearly your passion is very evident for what is important from your lived experience and I guess the relationship you have with your voters. So I wish you every success with this campaign. And I'm very grateful to you for making the time for this conversation. But for now, Francesca Hong, thank you for joining the Weekend Show.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism on Substack at The Anthony Davis. And I'll be back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.